Chapter 1. The Valuable Heirloom. The morning mist still clung to the honeysuckle when Miss Jane Marple made her way down the high street of St. Mary Mead. The village was all astir with the latest addition to their small community, Treasures of Time, an antique shop that had recently opened its doors in what had been the old post office building for as long as anyone could remember. "Another change," Miss Marple murmured to herself, adjusting her woolen shawl against the crisp autumn air, though perhaps not all changes are unwelcome. She paused before the newly painted green door, admiring the gleaming brass plate and the artfully arranged window display that featured an elegant Victorian writing desk and a set of Wedgwood plates. The bell tinkled pleasantly as she entered, and a gentleman appeared from behind a mahogany bookcase. He was perhaps 65, with silver hair brushed carefully back from a high forehead, and the sort of refined features that suggested good breeding. His suit was impeccably cut, though not showy, and his hands, Miss Marple noticed, were those of someone accustomed to handling delicate objects. "Good morning, madam," he said, his voice cultured and welcoming. "I am Edwin Graves, the proprietor. How may I assist you today?" "How do you do?" Miss Marple replied, her blue eyes twinkling. "I'm Miss Marple, and I thought I would come and welcome you to St. Mary Mead. We don't often have new establishments opening in our little village." Mr. Graves smiled, revealing even white teeth. "How very kind of you, Miss Marple. I've heard your name mentioned already. It seems you're something of a local institution." "Oh, dear," Miss Marple said with a modest flutter of her hands. "One does live in a place for rather a long time, and people will talk so. But your shop is quite splendid. Such beautiful things." As she moved through the shop, her keen eyes took in everything: the arrangement of furniture, the careful positioning of smaller items in glass cases, the way certain pieces seemed to catch the light just so. She paused before a central display case, her attention caught by a particularly exquisite piece. "Ah," Mr. Graves said, noticing her interest. "You have an excellent eye. That's a Georgian silver filigree box, late 18th century. Quite exceptional workmanship." The box was indeed beautiful, its delicate silver work forming intricate patterns of leaves and flowers, with tiny seed pearls set at strategic points. It seemed to glow with its own inner light. "It's not for sale, I'm afraid," Mr. Graves continued, a note of pride creeping into his voice. "A family heirloom, my grandmother's, actually. I keep it here because I believe beautiful things should be seen and appreciated, don't you think?" "Indeed," Miss Marple agreed, "though family treasures can sometimes carry quite a weight of history with them." Something flickered in Mr. Graves's eyes. Was it concern? But it was gone so quickly that Miss Marple couldn't be certain. "Quite so," he said smoothly. "Now, was there anything particular you were looking for today?" "Oh, I'm merely browsing," Miss Marple assured him, "though I do have a nephew who collects snuff-boxes. Perhaps another time." She left the shop after a few more minutes of polite conversation, the bell tinkling behind her as she emerged into the now bright morning. The mist had lifted entirely, and the village was going about its daily business. At 3:30 that afternoon, Miss Marple found herself at the Copper Kettle tea shop, where she had arranged to meet her old friend, Dolly Bantry. The Colonel's wife arrived in a flurry of scarves and good humour. "Jane, my dear, have you seen the new antique shop? Arthur's quite taken with it. He swears he recognizes the owner from somewhere. Says he knew him in the army, though under a different name. You know how Arthur is about faces." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, pouring tea. "Mr. Graves seems a very pleasant gentleman." "Oh, is that his name?" Arthur was certain it was something else. Graham, something beginning with G at any rate. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lady Selina Harcourt, whose grand manner always seemed slightly out of place in the cosy tea-shop. She swept in, her fur coat rustling, and made directly for their table. "Miss Marple, Mrs. Bantry," she said, without preamble, "I must speak with you. Something quite extraordinary has happened." Lady Selina's face was pale, and her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as she removed her gloves. "My dear Lady Selina," Miss Marple said gently, "do sit down. You look quite upset." Lady Selina sank into a chair, accepting a cup of tea gratefully. After a fortifying sip, she leaned forward conspiratorially. "I've just come from that new antique shop," she began. "I thought I might find something for the morning room, you understand. But while I was there, I saw something that gave me quite a shock." "Whatever do you mean?" Dolly asked, all attention now. "There's a silver filigree box in the main display case," Lady Selina continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A Georgian piece, quite distinctive. It was stolen from Harcourt Hall 20 years ago." Miss Marple set down her teacup carefully. "Are you quite certain, Lady Selina?" "Absolutely," the lady replied firmly. "It's an extremely unusual piece. My great-grandfather had it specially commissioned. There's a pattern of intertwined roses and thistles that's quite unique to our family. And more than that," she paused dramatically, "it contained documents of great personal importance to the Harcourt family, documents that were never recovered." "Did you speak to Mr. Graves about it?" Miss Marple inquired. "I most certainly did not," Lady Selina said indignantly. "If that man has my property, I shall involve the police immediately, though he did mention something about it being a family heirloom of his own." She sniffed disapprovingly. Family heirloom indeed. As Lady Selina continued her tale of outrage, Miss Marple's gaze drifted to the window. Through the lace curtains, she could see the antique shop across the street. Mr. Graves was standing outside, engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with a young woman in a smart navy suit. There was something in their postures, a similarity in the tilt of their heads, the set of their shoulders, that suggested a family connection. "I shall telephone Inspector Slack this very evening," Lady Selina was saying. "This is clearly a matter for the police." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said thoughtfully, her eyes still on the scene across the street. "It might be wise to proceed with caution. After all, 20 years is a very long time, and memories can sometimes play tricks on us." But even as she spoke these soothing words, Miss Marple's mind was already turning over the possibilities. A stolen heirloom, a mysterious shopkeeper, documents of importance. Yes, there was definitely something here that warranted closer attention. And if her years in St. Mary Mead had taught her anything, it was that in a small village, secrets had a way of coming to light, no matter how carefully they were hidden. As the ladies finished their tea and prepared to depart, Miss Marple noticed that the young woman had left, and Mr. Graves was standing alone outside his shop, gazing up at the upper windows with an expression she couldn't quite read. Was it worry? Anticipation? Or perhaps something else entirely? Time would tell, Miss Marple thought to herself. Time always did. Chapter 2. Mysterious Shopkeeper. Inspector Slack arrived in St. Mary Mead the following morning with his characteristic air of professional impatience. He was a tall, angular man, whose suits always seemed slightly too tight across the shoulders, as if his very frame resented the constraints of civilian clothing. His manner suggested that dealing with what he privately termed village nonsense was rather beneath his dignity, though he would never have admitted that his success rate significantly improved whenever a certain elderly spinster happened to be involved in his cases. Lady Selina Harcourt, he announced to Constable Polk, who had met him at the station, seems to think she's identified stolen property in this new antique shop. 20 years missing, she says. Probably just a similar piece, but we'd better look into it. The bell above the door of Treasures of Time announced their arrival with the same pleasant tinkle that had greeted Miss Marple the previous day. Mr. Graves emerged from the back room, his expression shifting from mild concern to professional courtesy as he recognized the official nature of his visitors. "Good morning, Inspector." "Slack. Inspector Slack. And you are Mr. Edwin Graves, proprietor of this establishment?" "I am indeed. How may I assist you?" "I understand you have a Georgian silver filigree box in your possession. I'd like to examine it, if you please." Mr. Graves's eyebrows rose slightly, but his voice remained calm. "Certainly, Inspector, though I must confess I'm rather surprised by official interest in my grandmother's box." He led them to the central display case and carefully removed the object in question. The morning light caught the intricate silverwork, making the tiny pearls gleam like drops of dew on a spider's web. "Lady Selina Harcourt claims this box was stolen from Harcourt Hall 20 years ago," Inspector Slack stated bluntly. "What do you say to that?" "I say that Lady Selina is mistaken," Mr. Graves replied evenly. "This box has been in my family for 3 generations. I have photographs of my mother with it from the 1950s, and documentation tracing its provenance back to my grandmother's marriage in 1920. He walked to a desk near the window and extracted a manila folder from a drawer. "Here are the relevant papers, Inspector. You'll find everything in order." Slack examined the documents with the suspicious thoroughness of a man determined to find fault. There were indeed photographs, slightly yellowed with age, showing a middle-aged woman wearing a dress with the distinctive style of the post-war period, the silver box clearly visible on a table beside her. There were also what appeared to be insurance valuations dating back several decades. "These seem satisfactory," Slack admitted reluctantly. Though Lady Selina was quite specific about the design, she mentioned roses and thistles. "A common motif in Georgian silver," Mr. Graves observed. "Though I grant you, the workmanship on this piece is particularly fine. It's natural that similar pieces might exist, especially as craftsmen of that era often worked from pattern books." "May I examine the box more closely?" Slack asked. "Of course." Mr. Graves handed it over, though Miss Marple, had she been present, might have noticed a slight tension in his fingers as he relinquished it. Slack turned the box over in his hands, studying it from every angle. He seemed particularly interested in the base, but Mr. Graves smoothly intercepted his examination. "Careful with the bottom panel, Inspector? The hinge is quite delicate, a weakness in these older pieces. I had it examined by a specialist when I inherited it, and he advised against unnecessary handling. Later that morning, Miss Marple encountered Colonel Bantry outside the library. The colonel, a bluff man with military bearing despite his advancing years, was frowning at a newspaper as though it had personally offended him. "Ah, Miss Marple," he said, looking up. "Been trying to place that fellow at the antique shop. Graves, he calls himself. But I'd swear I knew him during the war. Different name, though. Gresham, I think it was. Lieutenant Edward Gresham." "How interesting," Miss Marple murmured. "Are you quite certain?" "Well, it's been 40-odd years," the colonel admitted. "But there was something about him. The way he holds himself, perhaps. Gresham was involved in some unpleasantness toward the end of the war. missing artifacts from a French chateau we were using as headquarters. Nothing ever proved, mind you, but questions were asked. And what became of this Lieutenant Gresham? Resigned his commission rather suddenly. Never heard of him again until possibly now. That afternoon, Miss Marple paid another visit to Treasures of Time, ostensibly interested in a Victorian silver thimble displayed in one of the cases. As Mr. Graves wrapped her modest purchase, she engaged him in conversation about his background. "Have you always been in the antiques trade, Mr. Graves?" "Not always, Miss Marple. I started my career in the military, actually. After that, I spent some years in restoration work before opening my own establishment." "Restoration work? How fascinating. For private clients?" "Some private, some institutional. I had the privilege of working on several important collections." His hands, she noticed, tensed slightly as he tied the ribbon on her package. "Including a brief period at Harcourt Hall, as it happens." "Indeed? Then you must have known the family." "Only professionally. It was a long time ago." As Miss Marple prepared to leave, the shop door opened to admit a young woman in a well-cut charcoal suit. It was the same person Miss Marple had observed the previous day through the tea-shop window. At closer range, the family resemblance was unmistakable. The same grey eyes, the same determined set to the chin. "Ah, Olivia," Mr. Graves said, his professional manner warming into something more paternal. "Miss Marple, may I present my daughter? Olivia Graves? She's visiting from London." "How do you do?" Olivia said politely, though her eyes were wary. She was carrying a leather portfolio, which she held rather protectively against her chest. "Olivia works as an archivist at the British Museum," her father added with obvious pride. "She's been helping me catalogue some recent acquisitions." "How interesting," Miss Marple observed. "Such important work, preserving the past. Though I imagine you must encounter quite a few mysteries in your profession. Documents with unclear provenance, artifacts with disputed ownership." Something flickered in Olivia's eyes. "Constantly," she agreed. "It's rather like detective work, actually. One has to piece together stories from fragments of evidence." After Miss Marple's departure, she noticed through the shop window that father and daughter appeared to be having an intense discussion. Olivia had opened her portfolio and was showing her father what looked like old documents or photographs. Whatever they were examining seemed to cause some disagreement between them. That evening, Miss Marple received an unexpected visit from Miss Weatherby, the village's most enthusiastic gossip, who arrived breathless with news. "My dear Miss Marple, I simply had to tell you. I live just opposite the antique shop, you know, and I've noticed the most peculiar things, lights on at all hours, well past midnight sometimes, and people coming and going at the oddest times." "People?" Miss Marple inquired, pouring tea. "Well, the daughter, of course. She's been here all week. But there was another visitor last night, an elderly gentleman with a beard, carrying a briefcase. Very distinguished looking. They were in the shop until nearly 2 in the morning." "How very interesting," Miss Marple murmured, though privately she wondered if Miss Weatherby's observations might be coloured by her notorious insomnia and active imagination. The next morning brought a development that even Miss Weatherby could not have anticipated. Lady Selina Harcourt arrived at the vicarage for the monthly meeting of the Church Restoration Committee, clutching a letter that had arrived in that morning's post. The envelope bore no return address, and the message inside was typewritten on plain paper. "If you wish to recover what was taken from your family, look beyond the silver to what it contains. The box you seek is merely a key to a larger truth." What do you make of this, Miss Marple? Lady Selina demanded, having cornered her after the meeting. It arrived this morning. No signature, no return address. Miss Marple examined the letter carefully. The typing was even and professional, suggesting someone familiar with such machines. The paper was good quality, but unremarkable. The postmark, however, was local. Most intriguing, she said finally. It suggests that someone in St. Mary Mead knows more about your missing property than they've admitted. But what does it mean? Look beyond the silver to what it contains. The box was empty when it was stolen, save for the family documents. Perhaps, Miss Marple suggested gently, that's precisely what the writer wishes to draw your attention to. The documents themselves, rather than their container. As Lady Selina bustled off to consult with Inspector Slack, Miss Marple found herself reflecting on the curious chain of events. An antique dealer with a mysterious past, a disputed heirloom, anonymous letters, and midnight visitors. All the ingredients for a properly complicated puzzle. And at the center of it all, that beautiful silver box, sitting in its display case like a spider in its web, drawing everyone's attention while perhaps concealing the real truth. Miss Marple had always found that in cases like these, the most obvious element was rarely the most important. The question was, what was everyone overlooking? She decided it might be time to pay another visit to Treasures of Time. After all, she reflected, one could never have too many silver thimbles, and Mr. Graves had mentioned something about expecting a new shipment of Victorian sewing implements. Yes, another visit was definitely in order. Chapter 3. Nighttime Break-In. The morning fog still lingered over St. Mary Mead when the news spread through the village like wildfire. There had been a break-in at Treasures of Time during the night. Miss Marple learned of it from her housemaid Emily, who had heard it from the butcher's boy, who had been told by Constable Polk himself. By the time Miss Marple had finished her breakfast and put on her second-best hat, the one with the rather jaunty blue feather, quite half the village seemed to have gathered outside the antique shop. Inspector Slack's car was already parked at an awkward angle outside, suggesting he had arrived in his usual state of official irritation. Miss Marple approached the shop just as Mr. Graves was explaining the situation to a small crowd of interested onlookers. Nothing appears to have been taken, he was saying, his cultured voice carrying clearly in the morning air. The intruder seems to have been disturbed before they could accomplish their purpose. But the window's broken, observed Mr. Kimball, the chemist, pointing to the damaged pane in the shop's side window. Yes, that's how they gained entry, Mr. Graves confirmed, though curiously they seemed to have spent most of their time examining items rather than removing them. Inspector Slack emerged from the shop, notebook in hand. Move along now, he ordered the crowd. This is a crime scene, not a village entertainment. As the onlookers reluctantly dispersed, Miss Marple lingered, pretending to adjust her glove while observing the scene. The broken window was on the side of the building, partially hidden by a lilac bush. The flower bed beneath showed clear signs of disturbance. "Ah, Miss Marple," Inspector Slack said, noticing her. "I suppose you've already formed some theory about this business?" "Oh, no, Inspector," Miss Marple replied mildly, "though I couldn't help noticing those footprints in the flower bed. They do seem rather odd, don't they?" "Odd? How so?" "Well, they appear to be leading away from the window rather than toward it, as if someone left through the window rather than entered." Inspector Slack frowned and examined the prints more closely. "Could be the intruder's exit route," he said dismissively. "They often leave the same way they come in." "Of course," Miss Marple agreed pleasantly, "though one would expect to see prints going in both directions in that case, wouldn't one?" Before Slack could respond, Mr. Graves approached them. "Inspector, I've completed my inventory. As I said, nothing appears to be missing, though several items were disturbed. The display case containing the Georgian silver box was opened, but the box itself remained safely in place." "Interesting that they'd break in and not take anything," Slack mused. "Perhaps they were looking for something specific and didn't find it? Or perhaps," Miss Marple suggested gently, "they weren't looking for something to take away at all. Sometimes people break into places to leave things rather than remove them." Both men looked at her curiously, but before either could respond, Olivia Graves came hurrying down the street, her face flushed with concern. "Father, I just heard... Are you all right? What happened?" "I'm fine, my dear," Mr. Graves assured her. "Just a break-in, though nothing was taken." "But who would do such a thing?" Olivia's eyes darted between her father and the broken window. "And why?" That afternoon, Lady Selina Harcourt received another anonymous letter. This one was more specific. "The box is merely the key. The true treasure is hidden in plain sight. Look not at what is there, but at what should be there." She brought it immediately to Miss Marple, who was working in her garden, training the late-blooming roses. "Another one," Lady Selina announced without preamble. "Even more cryptic than the first. What do you make of it?" Miss Marple removed her gardening gloves and examined the letter carefully. Like the first, it was typed on plain paper with no distinguishing marks. "Hidden in plain sight," she murmured. "How very interesting. Tell me, Lady Selina, what exactly was in those documents that were stolen with the box?" Lady Selina shifted uncomfortably. "Family papers, legal documents, some personal correspondence." "Personal correspondence?" "Letters between my grandfather and, well, various parties, business associates mainly." Miss Marple's blue eyes were suddenly very sharp. "And were any of these business associates perhaps not entirely legitimate?" "My grandfather was a man of his time," Lady Selina said stiffly. "Business was conducted differently then." "Of course," Miss Marple agreed soothingly. "But these letters, might they have contained information that someone today would find valuable?" Before Lady Selina could answer, they were interrupted by the arrival of Miss Weatherby, practically vibrating with excitement. "Oh, Miss Marple! Lady Selina, have you heard? There's been another visitor to the antique shop, an elderly gentleman with a beard. He's there right now with Mr. Graves and his daughter." The three women made their way to the high street, where they could observe the antique shop from the discreet vantage point of the tea shop across the way. Through the window, they could indeed see Mr. Graves, Olivia, and a distinguished-looking elderly gentleman engaged in what appeared to be an intense discussion. "That's Professor Hargreaves," the tea shop proprietress informed them helpfully. "He's been staying at the inn for 2 days. Something to do with authenticating historical documents, I heard." Miss Marple ordered tea for the table, while keeping a watchful eye on the shop across the street. The professor was examining something under what appeared to be a special lamp, while Olivia stood by the window, whether keeping watch or simply nervous, it was hard to tell. "I wonder," Miss Marple said thoughtfully, "if our break-in last night might have been someone attempting to discover what documents Mr. Graves has been having authenticated." "But why break in?" Lady Selina demanded. "Why not simply ask to see them?" "Perhaps because the person breaking in already knew they had no legitimate right to see them," Miss Marple suggested. That evening, Miss Marple took her customary walk through the village, accompanied by her nephew's spaniel, Toby. As she passed the antique shop, she noticed lights still burning despite the late hour. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see Professor Hargreaves and Mr. Graves bent over the desk, examining papers under what was clearly a specialized light. Olivia stood nearby, her posture tense and watchful. The next morning brought a revelation that cast new light on the mysterious Professor Hargreaves. The vicar, Reverend Clement, mentioned at the parish council meeting that he had recognized their distinguished visitor. Professor Hargreaves is quite famous in certain circles, he explained. He specializes in authenticating historical documents, particularly those related to noble families. I read recently that he was involved in verifying some lost papers belonging to the Marquis of Edgecombe. Fascinating case. Documents that had been missing for decades, believed stolen during a burglary 20 years ago. Miss Marple's ears pricked up at this. 20 years ago? How interesting. And were these documents recovered? Not yet, as far as I know. But apparently someone had approached the family, claiming to have information about their whereabouts. The professor was called in to be ready to authenticate them if they surface. I see, Miss Marple said thoughtfully. And these documents, were they by any chance stored in a decorative box of some sort? The vicar looked surprised. Why, yes, I believe they were. The newspaper mentioned something about a Georgian silver box that went missing along with the papers. How did you know? Oh, just a guess, Miss Marple replied vaguely. These things often follow patterns, don't they? As the meeting concluded, Miss Marple found herself pondering the accumulating evidence. A Georgian silver box with a disputed provenance, missing documents from a 20-year-old burglary, an antique dealer with a mysterious past, and now a document authentication expert. The pieces were beginning to form a picture, though not quite the one everyone else seemed to be seeing. She decided to pay another visit to the antique shop that afternoon. As she approached, she noticed Sir James Harcourt, Lady Selina's son, just leaving the establishment. His expression was thunderous, and he barely acknowledged her greeting as he strode past. Inside, she found Mr. Graves looking unusually disturbed, though he quickly composed himself when he saw her. Miss Marple, how nice to see you again. Interested in more sewing implements? Actually, Miss Marple said, I was hoping to speak with your daughter. Is she here? Olivia? Yes, she's in the back room. Is something wrong? Not at all. I just had a question about document preservation for the church archives, you understand. Since she works at the museum... Mr. Graves hesitated, then called for his daughter. Olivia emerged, looking pale and worried. Miss Marple wanted to ask you about document preservation, her father explained. Of course, Olivia said, though her smile seemed forced. How can I help? As they discussed various methods of preserving old papers, Miss Marple carefully steered the conversation toward the subject of family documents and disputed inheritances. Olivia's responses grew increasingly guarded until finally she burst out, Sometimes the truth about the past isn't what people want to hear. Sometimes documents reveal things that families would prefer to keep hidden. Indeed, Miss Marple agreed gently. But surely the truth has a way of coming out eventually. Does it? Olivia asked bitterly. Not always. Sometimes people go to great lengths to ensure it stays buried. That evening, as Miss Marple was preparing for bed, her telephone rang. It was Mrs. Bantry, her voice high with excitement. Jane, there's been a fire at the antique shop. The fire brigade is there now. Miss Marple dressed quickly and hurried to the high street, where she found half the village already assembled. Flames were visible through the shop windows, though the fire brigade seemed to have the blaze under control. Mr. Graves was being attended to by Dr. Haydock, apparently suffering from smoke inhalation. "He was trying to save something from the back room," Constable Polk informed the crowd. "Foolish thing to do, but brave." As the flames died down and the smoke began to clear, Inspector Slack arrived and immediately began questioning witnesses. It was then that someone noticed. The display case that had held the Georgian silver box was empty, its glass shattered by the heat. "Well," Inspector Slack announced grimly, "it seems our thief finally got what they came for." But Miss Marple, observing the scene with her sharp blue eyes, wasn't so sure. Something about this fire, coming so soon after the break-in and the appearance of Professor Hargreaves, seemed too convenient. And if her growing suspicions were correct, the missing box might be the least important part of this increasingly complex puzzle. Chapter 4. Hidden Compartment. The morning after the fire found Miss Marple at the county library in Much Benham, a market town some 5 miles from St. Mary Mead. The librarian, Miss Amelia Burtonshaw, was a thin, precise woman who regarded her domain with the fierce protectiveness of a mother dragon. She had, however, a soft spot for Miss Marple, who shared her appreciation for properly maintained card catalogues and the importance of preserving local history. "Georgian silver boxes," Miss Burtonshaw repeated, adjusting her spectacles. "We have several excellent volumes on the subject. The craftsmen of that period were quite ingenious. Is this for your needlework circle?" "In a manner of speaking," Miss Marple replied evasively. "I'm particularly interested in boxes with hidden compartments or secret mechanisms." Miss Burtonshaw's eyes lit up with scholarly enthusiasm. "Ah, now that's a fascinating subject. The Georgian craftsmen were masters of concealment. Many of these boxes contained hidden drawers that could only be opened by pressing specific points in a particular sequence. Some even had false bottoms or sliding panels." She led Miss Marple to a section devoted to decorative arts and pulled down several volumes. "This one is particularly good," she said, opening a book titled The Silversmith's Art in Georgian England. It has detailed diagrams of various mechanisms used in the period. Miss Marple spent the next hour studying the intricate drawings and descriptions. She learned that many Georgian silver boxes featured secret compartments designed to hold valuable documents, jewelry, or private correspondence. The mechanisms were often concealed within the decorative patterns, with tiny pressure points hidden among the filigree work. The most sophisticated examples, the book explained, required a specific sequence of actions to reveal their secrets. A rose might need to be pressed, followed by a thistle, then a particular leaf, all in the correct order. Without knowledge of the sequence, the compartment would remain invisible and inaccessible. Returning to St. Mary Mead that afternoon, Miss Marple found the village still buzzing with gossip about the fire. The antique shop remained closed, its windows darkened with soot, but Mr. Graves had been released from the hospital and was reportedly resting at his rooms above the shop. Miss Marple decided to pay him a visit, armed with a jar of her homemade calf's foot jelly, a remedy she firmly believed could cure most ailments, physical or otherwise. She found Mr. Graves alone in his sitting room, looking pale and drawn. His usually immaculate appearance was somewhat dishevelled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Miss Marple," he said, attempting to rise. "How kind of you to call." "Please don't get up," she insisted, settling herself in a chair opposite him. "I brought you some jelly. It's very strengthening after a shock." "You're very kind." He accepted the jar with hands that trembled slightly. "I'm afraid I'm not very good company today." "Such a dreadful experience," Miss Marple sympathized. "And to lose that beautiful silver box as well, though I suppose it could have been much worse." Yes, he agreed, though something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. The fire brigade arrived very promptly. "I've been wondering," Miss Marple said conversationally, "about Georgian silver boxes. I visited the county library this morning. Such fascinating information about their construction. Did you know that many of them had secret compartments?" Mr. Graves stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Indeed. How interesting." "Oh, yes. Apparently the craftsmen were quite ingenious. Some boxes had hidden springs that could only be activated by pressing certain points in a specific order, rather like a puzzle, really. The box that was stolen from my shop had no such features," Mr. Graves said quickly. "It was quite straightforward, beautiful, certainly, but not complex." "Of course," Miss Marple agreed pleasantly, "though I couldn't help noticing when I saw it that there seemed to be a slight irregularity in the pattern on one side, a small indentation that didn't quite match the rest of the design." "You're very observant," Mr. Graves said carefully. "There was indeed a small imperfection. Damage from age, I always assumed." "Ah, age." Miss Marple nodded. "It does take its toll on all of us, doesn't it? Though sometimes what appears to be damage is actually something quite intentional." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Olivia Graves, carrying a stack of charred papers. "Father, I've been sorting through what we salvaged from the back room." She stopped short when she saw Miss Marple. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you had company." "Not at all, dear," Miss Marple said, rising. "I should be going. But before I do, might I ask, those papers you're holding, are they badly damaged?" Olivia glanced down at the documents in her arms. "Some are beyond saving, but others, well, it's curious. The fire seems to have been concentrated in one particular area of the room, almost as if someone wanted to destroy specific documents," Miss Marple suggested gently. Olivia's eyes widened, but before she could respond, her father intervened. "The fire chief said it probably started from an electrical fault," he said firmly. "These old buildings, you know. The wiring can be quite dangerous." After leaving the Graves residence, Miss Marple encountered Inspector Slack outside the police station. He looked even more irritable than usual. "Ah, Inspector," she greeted him. "Have you made any progress with the investigation?" "Progress?" Slack snorted. "I've got a break-in where nothing was taken, a fire that was apparently accidental, and a missing silver box that half the village seems to think rightfully belongs to Lady Selina Harcourt. Oh, and now I've got confirmation from Scotland Yard about something else entirely." "Indeed?" "That Edwin Graves is definitely the same person as Edward Gresham. Military records confirm it. Not that it matters much. There's no criminal record, just a change of name after his divorce 15 years ago." "How interesting," Miss Marple murmured. "And his employment at Harcourt Hall?" "He worked there all right, 20 years ago, just before the burglary. Left rather suddenly, according to the records. Lady Selina's husband dismissed him, though the reason isn't clear. That evening, Miss Marple received an unexpected visitor. Sir James Harcourt appeared at her door, his usual aristocratic composure somewhat ruffled. "Miss Marple," he began without preamble, "I understand you've been taking quite an interest in this business with the antique shop." "Just natural curiosity," Miss Marple replied, inviting him in. "Won't you have some tea?" "Thank you, no. I've come to ask, that is to suggest, that perhaps it would be better if this whole matter were dropped." "Dropped?" "My mother is elderly, and sometimes confused. This obsession with a silver box that may or may not have belonged to our family is quite unhealthy. As for these anonymous letters she's been receiving, Well, I suspect they're nothing more than someone's idea of a cruel joke. You don't believe the box in Mr. Graves's shop was your family's property? I think it highly unlikely, and even if it were, what does it matter after 20 years? The insurance paid out long ago. What concerns me more is this stirring up of old history. Some things are better left buried. What sort of things, Sir James? His face darkened. Family matters, private matters, things that have no bearing on the present. After Sir James departed, Miss Marple sat thoughtfully by her fire. His visit had been most illuminating, not for what he had said, but for what he had carefully avoided saying. The next development came late that evening when Olivia Graves appeared at Miss Marple's cottage, clearly distressed. "I'm sorry to call so late," she said, accepting the cup of cocoa Miss Marple offered. "But I had to speak to someone, and you seem to understand things that others miss." "What is it, my dear?" "I've found something among my father's papers, something that troubles me greatly." She pulled out a folded document from her handbag. "It's a floor plan of Harcourt Hall, with certain areas marked, and there's a list in code. But I've managed to decipher part of it. It appears to be an inventory." "An inventory of what?" "Items that were in Harcourt Hall 20 years ago. Some of them match the description of things that were reported stolen in the burglary." Miss Marple examined the documents carefully. "Why would your father have such papers?" "That's what frightens me," Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm beginning to wonder if my father knows more about that burglary than he's admitted. And that silver box. I think there's something about it he's not telling me." Before Miss Marple could respond, her telephone rang. It was Dr. Haydock, with shocking news. There had been another fire at the antique shop, and this time Mr. Graves had been seriously injured. "He's been taken to the cottage hospital," the doctor reported. "Smoke inhalation and some burns. He was trying to save something from the fire, kept muttering about protecting the truth." As Olivia rushed off to the hospital, Miss Marple found herself wondering what truth Mr. Graves had been so desperate to protect, and more importantly, who had been so determined to destroy it. The answer, she suspected, lay hidden somewhere in the mystery of that Georgian silver box, not in the box itself, but in what it concealed. The question was whether they would discover that truth before someone else paid an even higher price for these long-buried secrets. Chapter 5. Family Secrets. The second fire at Treasures of Time had caused considerably more damage than the first. The acrid smell of smoke lingered in the morning air as Inspector Slack surveyed the blackened interior of what had been the shop's back room. The main display area had been saved by the prompt action of the fire brigade, but Mr. Graves's private office and storage area were thoroughly destroyed. "Deliberately set," the fire chief confirmed to Inspector Slack. "Accelerant was used, probably paraffin. The point of origin was definitely the filing cabinet in the corner." "Someone wanted to destroy records," Slack muttered, making notes. "First the silver box goes missing. Now this. What was Graves hiding?" The inspector's mood was not improved by the arrival of Miss Marple, who appeared at the shop entrance wearing her serviceable brown coat and carrying her marketing basket. "Good morning, Inspector. Such a terrible business. How is Mr. Graves?" "Still in hospital. Conscious now, but not very communicative." Slack's tone suggested he found this personally offensive. "Claims he can't remember much about last night." "How unfortunate," Miss Marple murmured. "Though shock can do strange things to the memory. Has anyone checked on his daughter?" "Miss Graves is with him at the hospital, along with that professor fellow, Hargreaves. They've been thick as thieves all morning, going through what's left of his papers. Miss Marple's keen eyes swept the damaged shop. I noticed the main display cases weren't touched by the fire, yet the silver box is still missing. Vanished completely, either taken during the first fire or... Slack paused, frowning. Or never taken at all, Miss Marple suggested gently. Before Slack could respond, his constable appeared with news that Sir James Harcourt was demanding to speak with him urgently. With a grunt of annoyance, the inspector departed, leaving Miss Marple to her observations. Later that morning, she made her way to the cottage hospital, where she found Mr. Graves propped up in bed, his face drawn but alert. Olivia sat beside him, while Professor Hargreaves occupied a chair near the window, studying a sheaf of partially charred documents. "Miss Marple," Mr. Graves said weakly, "how kind of you to visit." "I brought some more of my calf's foot jelly," she said, placing the jar on his bedside table. "Though I see you're well attended." "Professor Hargreaves has been helping us salvage what we can from the fire," Olivia explained. "Some documents of historical importance survived." "Indeed," the professor added, peering over his spectacles. "Quite remarkable, really. Documents that could shed new light on certain events from the past." Miss Marple settled herself in the visitor's chair. "Mr. Graves, I've been wondering about something. That silver box, such a beautiful piece. Had it been in your family long?" Mr. Graves exchanged a glance with his daughter before answering. "Some secrets, Miss Marple, are kept not to deceive, but to protect." "Protect whom?" "Those who might be hurt by the truth. Sometimes the past is better left undisturbed." "And yet," Miss Marple observed, "someone seems very determined to disturb it, or perhaps to ensure it remains buried forever." That afternoon, Miss Marple called upon Lady Selina Harcourt at Harcourt Hall. She found the elderly lady in her sitting room, surrounded by photograph albums and old letters. "I've been going through family papers," Lady Selina explained, gesturing to the scattered documents. "Since all this business started, I've been remembering things I'd rather forgotten." "Such as?" Lady Selina picked up a faded photograph showing a grand house party from the 1890s. "My grandfather was not always a faithful husband. There was a scandal. Hushed up, of course. A child born to one of the household staff. The woman was sent away with a settlement, but the child... What became of the child? That's what troubles me. I found these letters only recently. They were hidden in a secret drawer of my grandmother's escritoire. They suggest the child was not sent away after all, but was raised locally under another name." "And the family documents that were stolen 20 years ago?" Lady Selina's hands trembled slightly as she set down the photograph. "They included correspondence about this matter, proof of the child's parentage, details of financial arrangements, things that could establish a legitimate claim to, well, to certain family properties, if not the title itself. Who else knew about these documents? My late husband knew, and James, of course. He was furious when he discovered them. Said they should be destroyed to protect the family name. We argued about it terribly. And Mr. Gresham, or Mr. Graves, as he's now known. Edward? He was cataloguing our library at the time. Such a knowledgeable young man. He may have seen some of the documents, I suppose. My husband dismissed him quite suddenly. I never knew exactly why." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sir James himself, his face flushed with anger. "Mother, I must protest. This continual dwelling on ancient history serves no purpose, and entertaining the notion that this shopkeeper's trinket is our property—" "James," Lady Selina interrupted quietly, I think it's time we spoke honestly about what happened 20 years ago. Her son's face paled. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. The night of the burglary, you were supposed to be in London, but the stable boy mentioned seeing your car returning very late. This is absurd. I won't stand here and be accused. No one is accusing you of anything, Sir James, Miss Marple interjected mildly. But the truth has a way of emerging, doesn't it? Rather like those hidden compartments in Georgian silver boxes. Press the right spot, and secrets are revealed. Later that evening, Miss Marple sat in her cottage, piecing together the fragments of information she had gathered. The telephone rang, startling her from her reverie. It was Olivia Graves, her voice urgent. Miss Marple, could you come to the hospital? Father wants to speak with you. He says it's time to tell the truth, all of it. When Miss Marple arrived at the hospital, she found Mr. Graves sitting up in bed, looking determined despite his pallor. Olivia and Professor Hargreaves were present, along with Inspector Slack, who had been summoned at Graves's request. I need to make a statement, Mr. Graves began, about what really happened 20 years ago and why I've returned to St. Mary Mead. Go on, Slack said, notebook ready. My real name is Edward Gresham, as you've discovered. 20 years ago, while working at Harcourt Hall, I found documents that proved my grandmother was the illegitimate daughter of Lord Harcourt. The evidence was concealed in a secret compartment of a Georgian silver box, a box that had been passed down through the illegitimate line as a sort of family secret. So the box really did belong to the Harcourts? Slack asked. Originally, yes, but it was given to my great-grandmother when she was sent away. The documents inside proved not only the connection, but also detailed financial provisions that were never honored. When I approached Lord Harcourt with this information, he was unsympathetic. His son, James, was even more hostile. What happened then? I was dismissed immediately, accused of theft, though nothing was ever proved. Shortly after, there was a burglary at Harcourt Hall. The silver box and the documents disappeared. I was suspected, of course, but I had an alibi. Why return now? Miss Marple asked gently. Because my daughter discovered our family connection independently through her work as an archivist. She convinced me it was time to seek recognition, if not restitution. I acquired a replica of the silver box and returned here, hoping to draw out whoever had the original. And the fires? Someone is very determined that the truth should never come out. The first fire was a warning. The second was meant to destroy any evidence I might have collected. Do you know who? Mr. Graves hesitated, then shook his head. I have suspicions, but no proof. As they left the hospital, Inspector Slack turned to Miss Marple. Well, that's a pretty story, but where does it leave us? We still don't know who took the original box, or who's been setting fires. Oh, I think we do, Inspector, Miss Marple replied quietly. The question is whether we can prove it. You see, there's one person who had both motive and opportunity, someone who's been trying to direct our attention elsewhere from the very beginning. Who? Miss Marple's blue eyes twinkled. All in good time, Inspector. But I think it might be wise to keep a close watch on Harcourt Hall tonight. Unless I'm very much mistaken, our fire starter will make one more attempt to destroy the evidence. The real evidence this time. The stage was set for the final act of their village drama, and Miss Marple had a feeling that before the night was over, all the hidden compartments would finally be opened. Chapter 6. Case solved. The autumn afternoon sun cast long shadows across Miss Marple's sitting room as she arranged chairs for what she privately thought of as the denouement, that satisfying moment when all the tangled threads of a mystery were finally woven into a coherent pattern. Her guests began arriving at 4 o'clock precisely, as requested in her politely worded but firmly insistent invitations. Inspector Slack appeared first, looking slightly uncomfortable out of uniform in his Sunday suit. Colonel and Mrs. Bantry followed, the Colonel still muttering about having recognized Graves from his army days. Lady Selina Harcourt arrived with her son, Sir James, who wore an expression of barely contained irritation. Mr. Edwin Graves, still pale from his recent ordeal but determined to attend, was supported by his daughter Olivia. Professor Hargreaves completed the party, carrying his inevitable briefcase. "Thank you all for coming," Miss Marple began, once her guests were settled with tea and her famous seed cake. "I thought it might be helpful to clarify certain matters regarding recent events in our village." "I don't see why this is necessary," Sir James interjected. "The police have their statement from Mr. Graves. Surely the matter is closed." "Not quite," Miss Marple replied gently. "You see, while Mr. Graves has been admirably honest about his family connection to the Harcourts, there remains the question of the original silver box, the fires, and what really happened 20 years ago." She turned to Mr. Graves. "Your real name is Edward Gresham, and you are indeed the great-grandson of the illegitimate child born to Grace Gresham and Lord Harcourt. When you discovered these documents 20 years ago, you approached Lady Selina's husband, believing the family might acknowledge the connection." "That's correct," Graves said quietly. "But Lord Harcourt was unsympathetic, and his son James was positively hostile. You were dismissed immediately." Miss Marple's keen eyes fixed on Sir James. "What you didn't know, Mr. Graves, was that young James had recently learned about these documents himself, and was terrified they might threaten his inheritance." "This is preposterous," Sir James began. "Please allow me to continue," Miss Marple said firmly. "You see, the burglary at Harcourt Hall 20 years ago was rather peculiar. Only specific items were taken, the silver box and certain documents. The thief knew exactly what to look for and where to find it, almost as if they had inside knowledge." She paused to sip her tea. "Sir James, you told your mother you were in London that night, but the stable boy saw your car returning very late. You staged the burglary yourself, didn't you? You took the box and the documents, then made sure suspicion fell on the recently dismissed Mr. Gresham." "You can't prove any of this," Sir James said coldly. "Perhaps not directly," Miss Marple conceded. "But let's consider recent events. Mr. Graves returned to St. Mary Mead with a replica of the silver box, hoping to flush out whoever had the original. His daughter, through her work as an archivist, had discovered their family connection independently and convinced him to seek recognition." She turned to Olivia. "You sent those anonymous notes to Lady Selina, didn't you, dear? You hoped she might be sympathetic to your cause?" Olivia nodded. "I knew she had acknowledged the truth once before. I thought she might help us." "The first break-in at the shop was interesting," Miss Marple continued. "Nothing was taken, but I noticed the footprints led away from the window, not toward it. Someone left through that window. Someone who had a key to enter through the front door but needed to leave without being seen. Sir James, you came to search for any evidence Mr. Graves might have accumulated against you. When you found nothing conclusive, you set the first fire as a warning." "But what about the missing silver box?" Inspector Slack demanded. "Ah, yes, the box that supposedly vanished during the first fire. But did it really? I think not. You see, Mr. Graves is cleverer than we gave him credit for. He suspected someone might try to steal or destroy his replica, so he removed it himself before the fire and hid it. He wanted to see who would come looking for it." Mr. Graves smiled slightly. "You're very perceptive, Miss Marple." "The second fire was more desperate. Sir James realized that Mr. Graves had been collaborating with Professor Hargreaves to authenticate copies of the documents that Olivia had painstakingly reconstructed through her archival research. The fire was meant to destroy these copies, but Mr. Graves was willing to risk his life to save them. Professor Hargreaves spoke up. The documents we've authenticated are quite genuine. They establish beyond doubt the Gresham family's connection to the Harcourts and their claim to certain family heirlooms. Miss Marple continued, but Sir James made one crucial error. He didn't know that his mother, Lady Selina, had kept her own copies of the key documents all these years. All eyes turned to Lady Selina, who straightened in her chair. I always believed the truth would come out eventually. My husband was wrong to dismiss Edward so callously, and James was wrong to stage that burglary. I've kept copies of the essential documents in my private safe for 20 years. Mother, Sir James exclaimed, how could you? Because it was the right thing to do, Lady Selina replied with quiet dignity. Your great-grandfather's actions may have been scandalous by the standards of his time, but the child and her descendants deserved recognition. I've already instructed my solicitor to amend my will. The Graves family, or should I say the Gresham branch of the Harcourt family, will receive their rightful share of certain family heirlooms. Sir James rose angrily. This is outrageous. I won't stand for— Sit down, Sir James, Inspector Slack ordered. I have some questions about your involvement in arson and the original burglary. As Sir James reluctantly resumed his seat, Lady Selina turned to Olivia. My dear, I believe this belongs to your family. She reached into her handbag and produced the original Georgian silver box. I've had it all along. I took it from James's room years ago when I began to suspect what he'd done. I've been waiting for the right moment to return it to its rightful owners. With slightly trembling hands, she demonstrated the secret mechanism, pressing a specific sequence of decorative elements. A hidden drawer sprang open, revealing yellowed documents inside. These are the originals, she said, handing the box to Olivia. Your birthright, my dear. Olivia accepted the box with tears in her eyes. Thank you, Lady Selina. We never wanted to cause scandal or claim more than was fair. We just wanted the truth acknowledged. And so it shall be, Lady Selina declared. She turned to her son. James, you will cooperate fully with Inspector Slack's investigation. You will also formally acknowledge the Graves family as cousins and treat them with the respect they deserve. The alternative is public scandal and possible prosecution. Do I make myself clear? Sir James, his face a mixture of anger and defeat, merely nodded. Later, as her guests departed, Miss Marple found herself alone with Olivia Graves, who lingered to express her gratitude. You know, Olivia said, examining the intricate silver box, Father always said the true value wasn't in the box itself, or even in the documents. It was in the truth they represented. Very wise, Miss Marple agreed. Though I must say, the craftsmanship is exquisite. Those Georgian silversmiths certainly knew how to keep a secret. Multiple secrets, actually, Olivia said with a small smile. She manipulated another part of the decoration, revealing a second compartment. This one contains a letter from my great-great-grandmother to her daughter, explaining the truth about her parentage. She wanted her descendants to know who they were, even if the world didn't acknowledge them. How extraordinary, Miss Marple murmured. To think that all these years the box carried not just proof of lineage, but a mother's love across generations. As Olivia left, cradling the precious box, Miss Marple reflected on the nature of secrets. They were rather like her garden, she thought. Some needed to be carefully tended and protected, while others needed to be brought into the light to truly flourish. The trick was knowing which was which. That evening, as she sat knitting by her fire, Miss Marple received a telephone call from Lady Selina. "I wanted to thank you, Miss Marple. Without your persistence, the truth might never have come out." "The truth has a way of revealing itself," Miss Marple replied. "Rather like those hidden compartments, one simply needs to know where to apply the right pressure." "James has agreed to my terms," Lady Selina continued. "He's furious, of course, but he knows when he's beaten. The Graves family will be formally acknowledged, and certain family heirlooms will be shared. It's only fair after all these years." "Most satisfactory," Miss Marple agreed. "And Mr. Graves, Mr. Gresham, will he continue with his antique shop?" "Oh, yes. He says he's grown fond of St. Mary Mead, and Olivia is considering opening a small museum here. The Hidden History of St. Mary Mead, she wants to call it. I've offered to be a patron." After ending the call, Miss Marple picked up her knitting again. Another mystery solved, another wrong righted. In her experience, justice sometimes came in unexpected forms. Sometimes it was a court of law, sometimes a family reconciliation, and sometimes simply the truth finally seeing the light of day. The silver filigree box had kept its secrets for generations, but in the end, even the most cleverly hidden truths had a way of working themselves free. Rather like the stitches in her knitting, Miss Marple thought, each one connected to the next, forming a pattern that only became clear when the whole piece was complete. Outside her window, St. Mary Mead settled into its evening quiet, the church clock chiming the hour. But Miss Marple knew that beneath the peaceful surface, stories and secrets continued to weave themselves into the fabric of village life. And when the next mystery arose, as it surely would, she would be ready, with her sharp eyes, patient manner, and understanding that human nature, whether in St. Mary Mead or the grandest mansion, remained remarkably consistent across the generations. For now, though, she was content. Another cup of tea, perhaps, and then to bed. After all, one never knew what tomorrow might bring in a village like St. Mary Mead.